Hi, welcome to my world headquarters here in Auburn, Massachusetts. It's a joke. This is my house. So, down and dirty kind of guy. I recently spent a lot of money, time, read a lot of articles, trying to figure out my drive train, what was most efficient specifically for the sport I do, which is triathlon. Mostly half and full Ironman distance. So obviously everybody's different. They're training for different things. They need different setups. But at the end of it all, looking back, I learned a bunch of lessons, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to let everybody know. All right, so the basics for you non-bike types. We're going to talk about chain rings, or your front rings, cassettes, your back rings where the chain touches, the chain itself, and then the sizes of them. Some of the treatments for lubricants you can look into. And then if you have Di2, I'll show you kind of a cool thing I discovered, how to figure out how much time you spend in each gear, because your Di2 records that. And so does ETAP from SRAM. I just don't have ETAP. So for the information of all hands, I'm Shimano 11-speed Di2. That's the drivetrain I'm running. I'll touch a little bit on bottom brackets and pulleys. Obviously, there's a bunch out there. For the money and ease of installation, because I do all my own work, you can't beat BB Infinite. Check them out. They do one-piece bottom brackets, and they have pulleys with ceramic bearings. So BB Infinite. Everything I talk about, I'll give you a link to as well. So you don't need to write any of this down. All right, so your front chain ring looks a lot like this. All right, this is a standard Dura-Ace 53 tooth, 39 on the inside. Okay, so 53, 39. That's pretty standard for most TT bikes and road bikes. So this is what comes on Shimano Dura-Ace. I upgraded to try out some ovals because I used to run key rings, but this is a absolute black 5339. It is oval shaped. It's a 5339. Really good, very light, durable. Ended up not going with it, but we'll get into that. And then I also tested out the drag to zero single 1X setup. My last race in Daytona. Obviously the advantage is there's only one of them, so you gain a lot of weight. You can take your front mech off, or your front derailleur. This is a 54 tooth, so it's a little bit bigger. There's a difference between the teeth. I don't know if you can see, kinda, but the teeth on the 1X are a lot more aggressive, bigger, and that's because the chain doesn't need to slide off of it, right? That's one reason. And the other reason is it keeps the chain on it. You don't want your chain coming off on 1X. That's a bad day. All right. So that's your front cassette, or your front chain rings. The rear part is a cassette. They vary in sizes. Shimano, I run an 1125 on my race disc and 1128 on my training wheel. So that means the little cog is an 11 tooth and the big cog is a 25 or 28. Most Shimanos will take up to a 30 tooth cog. I have found the 28 is about as big as I want to go, because it gets really close to my Di2 cable. It's just the way my bike is in the back. And then it varies. So on the 1125, and that's what I'll be talking about, and I'll be showing you in the spreadsheet I made. It's an 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 21, 23, and 25 tooth cog in the back. All right. The other concept you kind of need to understand is gear ratio. So let's say, for instance, your big ring in the front has 50 teeth. It's an imaginary bike. Obviously, those are 53s, right? So you have 50 teeth in the front, and your little ring in the back on your cassette has 10 teeth. So you take 50, you divide it by 10, you get 5. And that is your gear ratio when your chain is on the big and the little. So looking at that and understanding how gear ratio makes it either harder or easier to pedal, you can tell which gear you spend most of your time in and go from there. So I'll leave it at that now, but that's what gear ratio is. If you hear me say gear ratio, I'm talking about the difference between the front teeth and the back teeth. So 50 to 10, that's a gear ratio of 5. If it was 40 to 10, it'd be gear ratio of 4, right? And I made a spreadsheet that I'll make sure you can get to as well that can help you with figuring that math out. It's not super hard, but I understand we're not all math people. I am definitely a math person. All right, so let's get into it. First thing I want to show you is how to analyze your data. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Right there. Okay, so you should all see my Garmin Connect. So I'm logged into Garmin Connect and I went over here to activities. I'll just do it. Go to activities, all activities. Bring this up and I'll go to my last race. Well, one of my last races, which was a multi-sport. And you can search. Let's do this one. So Ironman 70.3 North Carolina, which was in Wrightsville Beach. And you can see my swim, bike, run. All right, we're gonna click on the bike portion here. And what we're after a .fit file or a fit file. So on the bike portion here, there it is. Go over to this little gear. I'm gonna hit that, and we're gonna go export original. So you can see there's a TCX, GPX, a CSV. We don't want any of that. The site I'm taking you to only takes fit files, and that is the original file format. So we're gonna export original. You can see there it is. And I'll show it in the folder. And there it is. There's my fit file from Wrightsville. So I'm going to cut that and put it in a nice, easy place here. My desktop, Di2 fit files, and we'll paste it here. And just to keep track of it, I'm going to rename it. This makes life easier once you get into the Ironman 70.3 North Carolina. All right, there we go. So we got our file. Get out of that. And now we're going to go to di2stats.com. So I was playing around here, but you're going to have to go in here. If it's your first time, it's di2stats.com. You make it's free. You make an account, and you can go ahead and upload your Di2 files. This is the only way I've really been able to look at my Di2 data. So the way we do it, you go import ride. You're going to choose the file. And there it is, 70.3, the one I just downloaded from my Garmin. And hit submit. And there it is. You can see Ironman 70.3 North Carolina gives me all kinds of data here. Total shifts, my front shifts, my rear shifts. The website's not perfect. There's like some glitches in it, but it's pretty solid. It gives you the big overview. So this is a pie chart here of my gear combinations. It uses inches. I don't like that. So I like ratio, but so 58% of the time I was in my 53.17. So just off the top of the head, 53.17. That's like a 3:3:1 gear ratio, so 3.31. And I'll show you on the chart how we did that. So based on the pie chart alone, I can tell I was in my 17 cog in the back, my 16, and my 15. So my 15, 16, 17, I spent 60, 80, 91% of the time, right? So that's good data. That tells me I'm in the center. What tells me one thing? It tells me I'm in the center of my cassette, which is where you want to be. The way your chain travels is important, especially over 4 or 5 hours. And it can help you select the proper setup. And this is what I used several iterations of this to figure out what the right chainring sizes were for me and what cassettes I should be running. But just scroll down here, you can see the shifting timeline. It tells you exactly when you shifted. Here's a timeline of the 53:21 that I was in that portion of the course. 19, I was in it in that portion. It gives you duration. But you can see here's 53:17. I was in that a bunch. 15, 16, 17, and 18, right in the center of the cassette. So this chart alone will tell you where you're at. For me, the reason I started all this is because I was finding that I was running out of gears. So on the high end, or when I want to go slightly downhill or down a hill, I would have to stop pedaling fairly quickly because it was pointless. I would run out of gear. So I was looking to add a bigger gear ratio between my front big chainring and my rear small chainring. For you, it might be different. Maybe you're climbing a lot of hills and you need a different combination to get up those hills. Whatever, it's really specific to the rider. But for me, I was just trying to be able to pedal a little bit more because I was finding myself not pedaling a lot. Even on flatter courses, I would run out of gears quite quickly. Obviously not on this day. Scrolling down just gives you the raw data, all kinds of stuff here, gives you your speed in each, which I found that kind of interesting. But there you go. And this gets saved. You can go back. You have a dashboard. Gives you all your stats. Here's my rides. You can delete them, do whatever you want to them. But I thought this was pretty interesting. This is where I went to look at, hey, how much am I shifting? And can I be in a better position? All right, so that's that. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here. And I'm going to share something else with you now. Super geeky Excel spreadsheet that I made. All right, don't get too scared away like this. All this is a simple Excel spreadsheet. For this purposes, I'm in comparison mode, so I'm comparing my Shimano Dura Ace 1125 with the 5339 to my Shimano Dura Ace 1125 with a 5842, which is what I eventually went to, a round rotor 5842. I don't have it here because it's on my bike, and I didn't want to take it off for this video. But so you can see the cog size, cassette cog size over here on the left of each of these. These are two different ones. Are the same, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 21, 23, and 25. Those correspond to the cogs on the back wheel. So that is your cassette. And then these ratios, ratio big, ratio small, these ratios are compared to either the big ring or the small ring. Over here it's 5842. Over here it's 5339. And you can see right away, on the 5339, my big ratio right here is 4.81. So that is the biggest ratio I'm going to get. And what that means is for every one rotation of your pedals, my back wheel is going to go around 4.8 times. essentially, right? And then when I switch to the 58, now every time I pedal once up front, my back wheel is going to go around 5.2, 5.3 times almost, right? So that's what I gained by going to the bigger ring. Right? And you say, okay, well, what am I giving up? Well, here's what I'm giving up a little bit. On the bottom end, with the 25 cog, I'm at a 1.68, as opposed to here, I'm at a 1.56, right? So I'm gonna have to pedal a little harder. If I'm ever in a situation where I'm doing a lot of hills, such as Ironman Blue Ridge, which I'll never do again. Yeah, if I had a 42 front small ring during that race, I probably wouldn't have finished. It's that hard. So I'm happy I had the 39, but I feel as though I can control that. And honestly, I'm exaggerating a little bit. 1.56 to 1.68. I doubt there's very many humans on the planet who could feel that in their legs, but it does make a difference. It is a slightly harder pedal, harder to pedal. So this does a ratio for everyone. I run my Di2 in full synchro mode. And what that prevents is cross-chaining. So essentially, when I'm on the big ring, my shifting prevents me from using any cog past 16. So these down here. So these ratios right here are irrelevant. The bike goes, yeah, if you want to go light, we're going to shift you onto the little ring. So you can see I jumped from a 3.6 to 2.4, which is actually not true because it actually jumps down too. But that's how I have it set up. That makes sense. Same thing on the other side. If I'm in my 11 through 19 or 11 through 19, yeah. 11 through 19, I'm always in the big ring. So these ratios mean nothing, essentially. And the reason that's important and something you should look at. So if you remember, I was in 15, 16, 17 for that race, right? Which over here, 15. So I'm at 3.5, 3.3, 3.1. That's where I like to be, 3.1 to 3.5. So that's changed now. So now I'm going to be 3.4 to 3.8, right? Which that was my only concern. I gained up on the big gear. I gained this bigger ratio, so I can go faster on flats and slightly downhill. But I lost a little bit of my comfort zone here, where I'm at 3.4 to 3.8 and 3.1 to 3.5. And the reason I like these three cogs and I want to be on these three cogs is to keep my chain as straight as possible. All right, we'll talk about that in a second. So this is a simple spreadsheet. I'll just go, you can do a single. I set it up just a different page where you can do single, and then on the links here, it has all the stuff I'm going to talk about. And I will share this somehow with you if you contact me. I'll give you this sheet on my, I'll put it on the cloud for you. All right, so that's some of the analytical stuff I did to kind of get me kind of on the right track of where I want to be as far as making a big change. So I had a need to not I had a need to not lose that pedaling on the downhill and some of the flats. So that's why it's sparked me to do all this research. Okay, all right, let's talk about chains for a second. So I also shifted my chain to a wax-based chain. So the startup cost of that is a little high, and you can buy these things, but they're not cheap. And generally, if you buy them, you have no way of rejuvenating them after their life is over. But believe it or not, if you buy a good quality chain, you use a wax-based solution, you could use a chain for a very long time. I'm talking years. Of course, you have to make sure it's good quality chain. And there is a thing called chain stretch that you should be concerned with. But if you do just basic maintenance on your chain, use a wax base, chain lubricant, rotate them out, chains can last a long time. So to save a ton of money is what I'm getting at. I think my startup cost to get everything going was like 200 bucks. And now I can do everything in my basement. And I just bought a bunch of chains. But I use a chain company called KMC. This is the DLC 11. This is what I use for racing. It's my race chain. It's pretty awesome. I use 11 speed. Even if you have a 8, 9, 10 speed, you can use an 11 speed chain. And the reason I would recommend it is because if you look at 11 speed chain, these outer plates right here, they're a lot thinner, obviously, right? Because the cassette's smaller and they have to be thinner. And what that gives you is a weight gain. So you can use 11 speed chains on anything. I use the DLC 11. This is a titanium coated chain. It's about 100 bucks. Really good. And then I use the same KMC X11 SL as a training chain just to keep the use down on my race chains. So these are about 60 bucks. The melt I use is about 40 bucks. I use Silka. And then I use a thing called PTFE powder, which is, if you ever seen those ice chains or those chains you can buy from Ceramic Speed, that's the white stuff. It's Teflon powder. So the wax plus the Teflon powder makes a really resilient, very well lubricated chain, and it'll make you faster. You will be able to tell the difference the first time you ride on a properly waxed chain. You'll be like, wow. So yeah, so back to the chain. We talked about the width here of the outer plates. A few things you want to look at if you're going to buy a chain for your bike, whether it's something you're going to use again or not, is weight, right? So the way they say weight is they shave down these outer plates. So I go 11 speed. These pins that hold the links together usually are hollow, save a ton of weight. And then it's coating. So a lot of times they're coated with titanium or they're polished, but a nice, good coated chain, hollowed out pins, 11 speeds, what you're looking for. Like I said, this one's 60 bucks and it's as good as any. All right. Cost me about, after startup cost me about $14 to re-wax a chain. And I can use a chain for about 25,000 miles if I do it right. And you get about 350 to 400 miles per treatment. So yeah, I mean, it's been great. I'm really enjoying it. All right, so let's talk about friction and why, lubricant, whatever lubricant you're using, why you need it. So a lot of people think a chain, when it goes around or it touches the cassette or the front chain ring is where you get friction from. And that's true. Obviously, anything touching each other is going to cause friction, right? But that's not really the friction you're worried about, especially if you're doing five-hour bike rides or 2.5-hour bike rides, right? The friction you're worried about, and if you'll remember, I talked about being on those center cogs in the back of the cassette. And the reason I want to be in the center the most of the time is because the angle of your chain, right, is important. So if your chain is super straight, it's going to run the most efficient. What happens though is you go to the big chain ring on the front and you're on the big chain ring in the back, and that's called cross chaining. And what that does is it bends your chain like this, right? And as your chain is bent, now these outer plates are rubbing on these inner plates where they intersect these pins. So if you could imagine taking a chain and bending it this way, and that's how your chain is running, and it has to almost like go sideways. That's where you get the most of your friction, and that's where you start wearing your chain out, and that's where your chains get really wobbly. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. And that's why I got into the Di2 stats. I figured out what cogs I'm on in the back for my races, because I want my chain to be as straight as possible. So hopefully what I gain by going to the bigger rings in the front is I gain the bigger gear ratio, that over 5 revolutions per every one in the front. So I can pedal harder on downhills, and I don't lose that straightness of my chain when I'm on flat. And that's it. All right, I hope you learned something. If you have any questions about chains, I have more knowledge than probably any human will ever need in 3 lifetimes, never mind 1. So let me know. Have a happy new year and wish you all the best. Good luck.